This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, or should I say welcome back, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Noah Tsaluki, and on this episode, Michigan with their big victory over Ohio State to remain undefeated and face off against the Purdue Boilermakers in the Big Ten Championship. I want to talk about the game and how it broke Ohio State football and what it means for Michigan moving forward in this year's Big Ten Championship and possible college football playoff berth as well. And also, like it is every episode of discussion, the Detroit Lions losing on Thanksgiving. They had that 3-game winning streak, but it was halted on a game-winning field goal by Tyler Bass in front of the nation on a national audience. Well, I'll talk about that game as well. But I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and really a great last month or so. I've taken about a month hiatus from the podcast. It's just been really busy times for me here at John Carroll, and you know, I'm really invested in this other podcast that I'm doing called Streak Center, which is actually our athletic department's podcast that we interview student athletes and coaches here at John Carroll, and then talk about sports, the sports that are going on at JCU as well. So I've been really busy with that and a bunch of other projects that I've been doing. But luckily, I really wanted to find some time to do this week as well. Also, I forgot to mention later on in the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Tom Orosz. Tom was a former 4-year punter at The Ohio State University and also punted for 4 years in the NFL, 2 with the Miami Dolphins and 2 with the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to hear about his story later and really about his career playing for Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Don Shula, Earl Bruce, Bill Walsh. It's some of the stories he's had is pretty good. I met him in Miami last year, so at Don Shula's Celebration of Life, as I've documented on the podcast before. So finally, it's been able to work out. I've been wanting to get him on for a long time, but I thought it was appropriate, especially with Ohio State and Michigan just playing last week as well. All right, so I want to talk about this Michigan game, and it was a thumping of Ohio State. I mean, this game, and first of all, this was the first Michigan game I had watched all year. I hadn't watched a single game up until this point from this season. And so I'm not going to pretend like I knew everything about Michigan football. I knew some basics. I knew Blake Corum was in the Heisman conversation. I knew J.J. McCarthy was giving them a little bit more offense at the quarterback position. I knew that the defense might even be better than it was last year. But I did not expect this. I am overjoyed and I am so, I guess, flabbergasted that this happened. This goes back to last season. Last season, Michigan beat Ohio State by pretty much the same score. And it was at the Big House. You know, they were coming off the COVID year. It was, I honestly thought it was a little fluky. You know, it's at Michigan, playing in the cold weather, snowing. I thought it was a little fluky. It was not, for real. I thought as soon as that game ended next year, I thought to myself, there is no way that Michigan is beating Ohio State next year. The whole mantra of Ohio State is to beat Michigan. You have to beat Michigan. That's how it's been since before the days of Woody Hayes. And they had spent so much energy and so much time into the rivalry. 364 days. They, at their practice facility, I didn't realize this, Ohio State has 3 clocks. 3 countdown clocks to the Michigan game in their facility. 3. There is so much emphasis that is put on this game. So I thought all the preparation, 364 days of the year, all the preparation into the Ohio State-Michigan game. They're playing in Columbus, a game that had not been played in Columbus since 2018. It's going to be a sea of red, and sure it was. Oh, man, it was a sea of red over in Columbus. And the fact that Michigan not only just won, but they absolutely dominated. I really think it broke Ohio State football for the time being. I really do. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that, and I agree. I mean, you could see it. The Michigan players celebrating. Ohio State bench being very down. I mean, even Tom Orosz was talking about it on Fox Sideline. How, as a sideline reporter, how the Ohio State sideline remains very tense. Michigan very calm, very happy throughout the whole game. Even when the game was a little close. Ohio State knew Michigan had them on the ropes. I could just tell from even just Tom Orosz's analysis. Also, J.J. McCarthy. I have to admit, I didn't know much about J.J. I don't. I know that Cade McNamara was benched for J.J. And I got to say, J.J. played with so much confidence in that game. He did not look scared by the moment at all. This guy was smiling when he was out on the field, smiling on the bench. I mean, heck, if anyone noticed, his hand had a smiley face on it. This guy was not fazed by the big game. I think J.J. McCarthy's play is one that goes underrated in this game. Now, am I going to sit here and say J.J. is some Heisman candidate and he's some really, really big star? No, I'm not going to say that. I think C.J. Stroud is probably a better quarterback than J.J. is. However, when all the chips were on the table, he delivered. I mean, he only completed 50% of his passes. He was 12 of 24. But 12 completions, 263 yards. I mean, the story of this game was big plays. And I think Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator for Ohio State that they invested a lot of money in to get this defense better, he played what I thought was an arrogant defense. What I mean by arrogant is he said, we have better athletes than you. I'm going to keep running single coverage, single high safety, man-to-man. We are going to beat you because we have better athletes. And he never changed. He never wavered from that philosophy. There was no adjustments made at halftime. Ohio State only scored 3 points in the entire second half. 3. For one of the best offenses in the country. But Jim Knowles just stuck to this defense. It actually reminded me of when Don Brown in 2019, when Ohio State blew him out like 63-28 or whatever it was. Don Brown could not defend against the crossing routes. He did not adjust his defense to stop the crossing routes. Ohio State, first half, second half, all they did was run these crossing routes, and they had all success all day against Michigan. Don Brown didn't change his defense. Jim Knowles didn't change his defense against Michigan. That's what set up these big plays. That's why J.J. threw for 3 touchdowns. That's why Cornelius Johnson had an absolute field day. 4 balls, 160 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, J.J., all he had to do was just boop, throw it over the safety, hit Johnson in stride. I mean, these guys were wide open, too. Wide open. And I think Ohio State really underestimated the athletes that Michigan has. I really do. Donovan Edwards. How about this for a story, too? Blake Corum, who has been a Heisman candidate all season, have been a phenomenal running back. He hurt his knee against Illinois and tried playing on it. And I think it was like the first play that he tried to cut. He had nothing. So basically, Blake Corum was out for the game, and he's out for the season. He's going to have knee surgery. But Donovan Edwards comes in, and he starts running that football. 216 yards. I mean, this was like Karan Higdon from last year. 2 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, Michigan overall had 4 plays of 70 or more yards. 4 plays. You could tell Michigan wanted it. They wanted it more than Ohio State. In their backyard, with all of their fans, the sea of red at the Horseshoe. Michigan wanted it more. And that's something that we haven't seen in this rivalry in probably over 20 years. Ohio State has absolutely kicked Michigan around in this millennium, really. This is the best that it's been for Michigan in the rivalry since probably the late 90s. Think about that. A lot of these guys weren't even born when Michigan football was this relevant in the rivalry. And I really do think Michigan runs the Big Ten now. I think they broke Ohio State football. I think Ohio State's going to have to do a lot of soul searching because they were the bullies. They used to be the bullies. Now Michigan is the bullies. And think about the expectations that are at Ohio State too. Ryan Day is 45-5 as a head coach. And some people want him fired because he's 1-2 against Michigan all time. 2 of his 5 losses are against Michigan now. That's a 90 winning percentage. And they want him fired. Think about the expectations at Ohio State. It's absolutely incredible. Wow. I mean, how much they emphasize that Michigan game in those big games. I question about Ryan Day. Does he care about the rivalry as much as Urban Meyer did, as much as Jim Tressel, as much as Woody, Earl Bruce? These guys knew the rivalry. They knew how important it was. Jim Harbaugh, I think it's obvious that he knows about the rivalry because he's a Michigan man. He played football for Bo, under Bo, quarterback. He's probably going to be at Michigan for the rest of his career. Think about Jim Harbaugh, too. Remember in 2015 when he was hired? Everyone was sold on the program being national contenders. And it took him a long time. People wanted him fired. But I think now this is the program that people wanted it to be back in 2015 when he was hired. This is what people envisioned. And to see it now come to fruition, it's pretty incredible. I really do think Michigan can win the national championship now. I think they're going to steamroll Purdue. Now, I know Purdue is upset-minded, and they call them the Purdue spoiler makers and all this other stuff. No. I think Michigan's going to steamroll them. They're going to be the Boilermaker train steamrolling Purdue. That's who they're going to be. And I think about that big Boilermaker train at Greenfield Village. It's just when I used to work there back in the day. But I think they're going to roll Purdue, get into the playoff, and they're probably going to be the 2 seed unless Georgia loses. I think TCU. So Georgia will, if they win the SEC championship, which I think they will against LSU, then they'll get the 1. Michigan 2. TCU wins, they'll be 3. USC wins here on Friday, they'll be 4. But I'm interested to see if any of these teams lose, especially TCU and USC, if they decide to put Ohio State in. Because Ohio State's sitting at 5, Alabama at 6. I would rather have Alabama in the playoff than Ohio State. I really do think Ohio State was soft in that game. They didn't even make their conference championship game, and they're still being considered. I mean, that's just the kind of year it's been in college football, where there's a lot of those 1 to 2 loss, or there's really a lot of the 2 loss teams, and they've had to try to work some of these 1 loss teams in, and it's just like some of these guys don't even deserve to be there, So it's, and then it's like a fluky undefeated season. And it's just like, no, you're undefeated. If you're undefeated, you should be in the playoff. Gosh, I really hope Michigan plays TCU, Georgia plays USC, and then for all the marbles, national championship, Georgia versus Michigan. I want to see Michigan take down the SEC. This could be, if Michigan, so if this happens, and I don't like looking too far ahead, but if this happens, this could be a changing of the guard in college football. Michigan maybe has that long term of dominance. Who knows? But, I mean, you're already starting to see it in recruiting. Guys have already flipped from Ohio State to Michigan or from other schools to committing to Michigan just based off of this win. This could be a big recruiting tool if they go far in these, if they go far in the playoff and they win some games. It's gonna be interesting. I'm excited to see what Michigan football can do, and look, I'm not really a Michigan football fan. I respect them just like I do Michigan State football. Basketball, I'm a Michigan State fan, but football, I just kind of respect both teams, and watching that game made me proud to be a Michigan resident. It made me proud that I was able to witness a a defeated of Ohio team. I mean, they're crushed. Look, I'm over here in Cleveland at John Carroll, and John Carroll isn't like a big Ohio State as much as it's kind of like a melting pot of college football teams. You get Penn State people, you get Ohio State, you get Michigan, you get Notre Dame. It's kind of like a big melting pot of college football teams. But the Ohio State fans that are here at John Carroll, they are just crushed. One of them was telling me that he's never been more. This guy's a diehard Ohio State fan, and he's one of the most honest. My man Paul, big shout out to him. He's one of the most honest Ohio State fans that I've ever met, and he said this is the most crushed he's felt about Ohio State in his entire life. He has never, even last year, he said he thought it was a little fluky, but this year he said it was the nail in the coffin. He said Ohio State has to change. Maybe one day we can get him on the podcast. He can rant about his OSU Buckeyes, but gosh, it was a total onslaught defeat of Ohio State, and really really good to see, really good to see. And Michigan doing exactly what they needed to do, go undefeated. If they went undefeated, I would take them for real. They did. I'm officially taking Michigan for real. And I know they didn't really play anyone up till the Ohio State game and all this other blah, blah, blah. But they won games. They won every game, and they did what they were supposed to do. So, like I said, I think they're going to steamroll Purdue and then go into the college football playoff. And I think they can win this national championship. Georgia is not as dominant as they were last year. And, who knows? Who knows what happens, but I expect a Georgia-Michigan national championship. That's for sure. All right, I want to talk Detroit Lions before we do our interview with Tom Orosz, hear about his career and in the Ohio State uniform as well. He was actually at the game as well, so we're gonna we'll get his thoughts on the game a little bit as well. But the Lions. So it's been a while since we've talked Lions, of course, taking the 1 month hiatus. But just to give you a little, just to catch you up, I guess. So traded T.J. Hawkinson. I don't want to get, that's just kind of old news now, but they went on a 3-game winning streak. They beat Green Bay, they beat Chicago, and then they beat the Giants. I mean, the Giants win was a dominant win too in New York, and Aiden Hutchinson's been coming on the last 3 games. Before the Buffalo game with the 2 interceptions, and he just got named NFC Defensive Player, the Rookie of the Month. So to see that in the 3-game winning streak was really good, and I thought for a second there was a little bit of playoff hope too into the Buffalo game, and going into the Buffalo game, I actually did think the Lions had a legit chance. I know that there was some guys in Buffalo that were banged up, and Josh Allen he's not really the same since that shoulder, or I'm sorry, that elbow injury. He was wearing those long sleeves to cover up the the stuff on his elbow, I think. Just not the same kind of guy. So the Bills were kind of limited on a short week, short rest as well, and I thought the Lions came in with a lot of momentum at home on Thanksgiving, and but it was just pretty unfortunate because, gosh, were they with them. They were with them the entire game. They had the Buffalo Bills beat, feeding off the crowd's energy, feeding off of the whole Thanksgiving thing. And I really, really think it was that 3rd down call towards the end where they botched it. And look, I've been a big fan of Ben Johnson this year. I don't think the offense is the problem at all. I think the problems have been more defensively. I'm not saying the offense is free of any criticism, but I really do believe that the offense was not the majority of the problems. I've liked Ben Johnson, but I just was kind of confused by that play call on 3rd and 1. So the Lions with some good graces had Tyler Bass miss an extra point. He missed a field goal. But then Badgley missed a chip shot. So basically the Lions were still in this game. And, they had a chance to tie. They did. But you could tell the whole time Dan Campbell was just trying to take the field goal. And there's a lot of fans out there that says, why not go for the touchdown? Guys, here's my whole thought on this. I take the more conservative approach, and I know. And think about Dan Campbell and how aggressive that he's been this entire year. Everyone wants to criticize Dan Campbell for being too aggressive. 4th and 9 at the Patriot 32 yard line, the big one this year, I thought. Then, when he's too conservative, oh no, you got to be more aggressive. Where's the bottom line? Guys, I think part of the reason the Lions won 3 straight games was because Dan Campbell was a little more conservative. Take the points. Don't try to go for the 4th down every time. Take the field goal. Stuff like that. And I think that's what Dan Campbell was kind of thinking. Let's be conservative here. Let's not be stupid. I've learned my lesson from the first half of the season. So I think that's why they were trying to be conservative. Now, the one thing, though, I think they messed up was kind of like the play clock usage. And, I remember thinking, 3rd and 1, we got one of the best lines in the league, supposedly. We've had a good success running the football today. Let's punch it in. Let's just punch it in on 3rd down, force the Bills to use their timeouts. But instead, they'd try this deep ball on 3rd and 1 to DJ Chark, who has missed the last couple games, and it was incomplete. So then that stops the clock automatically. The Bills don't have to use a timeout. And I can understand the thinking a little bit behind the play. Whereas, okay, if we get the 1st down, the Bills are still going to call a timeout. If we don't get it, somebody will call a timeout to conserve clock. That's probably what they were thinking. However, in my situation, I would just force the Bills to use a timeout. I wouldn't even think about throwing it. And I understand they're trying to get the Bills, off, and then try to get it a little bit more into Bills territory, just to make it a little bit more comfortable for Michael Badgley, because he was attempting a 50-plus yard field goal. This is a guy that does not make 50-plus yard kicks consistently. So I think Ben Johnson, they were thinking, okay, well, even if the Bills are still going to use the clock is still going to stop even if we run the football, somebody's going to call a timeout on the Bills. Let's at least try a little shot to see if we can get it a little closer. I think that's what they were thinking. However, Badgley ended up making the field goal, but I just think in that situation, you let the Bills use a timeout, because as a Lions fan, I was not comfortable after we made the field goal and tied it up, because I knew there was too much time left. I knew there was 28 seconds. It's not like there was 2. There was 28 seconds. And I know with a quarterback like Josh Allen, it made me think that's plenty of time for this guy. It's funny. I immediately thought of that Kansas City-Buffalo game. How, Mahomes only needed, 12 seconds or whatever the heck it was to get into field goal range. And I was like, man, 28 seconds with 2 timeouts, or was it 3 timeouts, I think? Man, they're in business. And sure enough, the first play, he throws a dart to Stephon Diggs, who had some really good coverage on Kirby Joseph. Kirby Joseph had some really good coverage, but man. And then Allen ran, and then he got 10 more yards, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is just poor clock management, I think. I think if they could have taken a little bit more time off, and there was that one play, I think before the 3rd down play, where they were reviewing the spot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the Lions had actually called a timeout, and there was 12, there was 15 seconds or so, but they ended up giving them 12 seconds back. And I think that kind of hurt the Lions too when they gave them 10 plus seconds left on the clock. I don't know. Regardless, though, I think just think about how different it would be. 4-7. Think about it. 5-6, beating a team with a winning record. Dan Campbell would have been 4-0 against teams above 500. That would have given the Lions, I think, some real juice and momentum going into Jacksonville on Sunday. And that's not going to be an easy task, guys. I think at the beginning of the year we kind of wrote this one in as a win. I would not write this as a win for the Lions right now. Jacksonville coming in really hot. They just beat a really hot Baltimore team in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, he grew up a little bit as a quarterback, I thought. I actually watched the tail end of that game, and he was making some big boy throws in clutch situations. And then Doug Peterson rolls the dice, and they go for 2. They go for the win. And he throws an absolute dart on the 2-point conversion, wide open touchdown. I mean, he grew up a little bit. So Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville's coming a little hot. So this is not going to be an easy game for the Lions. However, I do think the Lions, they should pull this one out. I think they have a better offense overall. And I think the defense can step up and play well, especially with the emergence of Kirby Joseph and some of these other DBs who've been pretty good so far. Hopefully, I don't know the status of Jeff Okudah, but hopefully he's back. And I really think being at home, I just don't want this loss on Thanksgiving to dampen any hopes for the Lions, because they're still, quote, in the graphic. They're still in the playoff hunt, even at 4-7. So these games in the last 5-6 games, whatever it is down the stretch, these are very crucial to this playoff push. Now, am I going to sit here and saying that the Lions are going to guarantee to make the playoffs? No. But what I'm saying is there needs to be signs of improvement with this team. We've already won more games at this point than we did last year. Great. Let's finish the season strong. Let's show people that this team has improved. I'm sick of these fans that flip-flop everything. Oh, at the beginning of the season, fire Dan Campbell. Oh, he wins 3 games, keep him. Now he messes up at the end of the game with the clock management, fire him. Like, pick one or the other. The Lions are going, I think they have a bright future. I do. But we got to give these guys a chance. And I think there has been growth this season. Good teams rebound after a tough loss like that. They learn their lessons. This is the week that the Lions learn their lessons from that devastating Bills loss and go into this Jacksonville game and get a win at home. Because then after that, it's divisional games. You got Minnesota the week after at home. And I don't think Minnesota, they're what, 8-2, 9-2, whatever it is. They're not some special team. I think the Lions had them on the ropes last time. You got the Jets, who Sauce Gardner in the defense is playing well, but whoever the heck they're trotting out there at quarterback, you really think the Lions don't have a chance in that game? Panthers, another team who fired Matt Rule earlier in the year. Who the heck they're trot out at quarterback? Bears, Lions have already beaten them. Justin Fields is a little banged up. And then the Packers, who I think have just kind of punted on the season. There are a lot of winnable games in the last 6 games here for the Lions, I think. And it's just about that hope and that belief that they can do it. That's what it is, I think. Let's hope that the players and they all have trust in the coaching staff and they can move forward. But this is the NFL. Like, there's no easy wins, obviously, but I think the Lions could rack up some wins as we get closer to the end of this season. Coming up next, we have an interview with Tom Orosz, former punter for Ohio State and in the NFL, only on Open Mic Night.
And joining us now here on the Open Mic Night podcast is Tom Orosz. He was a 4-year punter at Ohio State from 1977 to 1980. Also punted in the National Football League for the Miami Dolphins and the San Francisco 49ers. Tom, it's a real pleasure to have you on. Really glad that we were able to work this out. And thanks for coming on.
Same here. And don't forget the great high school of Fairport Harbor Skippers.
That's right. Of course, Tom is still living in the Cleveland area. Yes, Fairport, where he went to high school, not too far from Paynesville, where Don Shula grew up. Actually, Harvey High School as well.
But the schools are about 4 miles apart.
Right. So, of course, Tom and I we met back in Miami last year at Don Shula's Celebration of Life. And we've remained in touch ever since. And it's been a while. I've been wanting to get you on. And really, really happy that we were able to do this right now. But, oh, my gosh, Tom, I mean, I mentioned in the intro how you punted it for 4 years at Ohio State, 2 for Woody Hayes and 2 for Earl Bruce. We'll get into that later. But I got to ask you about this Ohio State-Michigan game. I mean, it was epic. Michigan really handed it to Ohio State. I mean, what did you think of that game?
Well, I was very surprised, I think, like most people. But, Michigan came to play. There were just too many big plays. You can't give up 5 plays or 6 plays or more that are, 50 yards plus. I don't know the exact stats, but, that was pretty much, the game. Obviously disappointed, but Michigan came to play. We were ahead. They came back, but very disappointing.
And you were at the game too, right?
I was. That's correct.
Well, now, is it like, do they invite, past players to come and all that kind of stuff? Or did you just go,
Yeah, well, most of us have season tickets for the games. And also, too, for that game, I don't know if you've noticed, there was called what's the Tunnel of Pride, where ex-football players line up on the field and the team runs out between us. So that's always pretty neat.
And so when you were at Ohio State, how much was that Michigan game, the team up north game? How much was that stress to you guys during your
It was everything. During the weekday in the dorms, the band would come around and play through campus. You'd go eat at the cafeteria, because back then we just had training table at dinner during the football season. But people would always ask about the Michigan game, how you feeling? And it's not just, it's a whole week buildup. Actually, it's a whole year buildup for that matter. But during the week when you're at school, it's definitely something special.
And I remember you telling me too, Bo Schembechler recruited you out of high school too at Michigan. Is that
That's
correct? Yeah.
Correct.
And then of course, Woody Hayes recruited you. I'm curious to know, what were the 2 recruiting pitches that you heard from Bo and from Woody, and why ultimately did you choose to go to Ohio State?
Well, I got to admit, probably just Ohio State being in Ohio. To me, I was never a Michigan fan, but obviously, you're going to listen to who anybody wants to talk to you. But that was the ultimate. And, my parents, I know they wanted me to go to Ohio State. Not that I went to Ohio State for them, but that's the reason.
Did Bo and Woody, did they sit in your living room and talk to your parents and all that? Like some of those other
Actually,
things?
Woody did. If I remember correctly, Bo never came to Fairport. And I remember having conversations with him. But, Woody, Woody was funny. And I'm sure a lot of coaches, they recruit parents just as good as they recruit football players. A lot of times with Woody, the parents would say, you know what, I think you ought to go to Ohio State. He was just such a charmer. He would say, you know what, I'm going to treat him like he's my own son. And he did. Well,
Chris Spielman at Ohio State, he was going to originally go to Michigan. And then his father said, no, you know where you're going. And he went to Ohio State.
Yeah.
And the rest
that turned out to be a pretty good move.
It did for sure. For sure. I'm playing under Earl Bruce and all that as well. But I got to ask you, Tom, with this whole buildup of the 10-year war with Bo and Woody, and Bally Sports came out with a documentary that is new for this year. I watched it over the weekend. It was fantastic. It just really made me think of the rivalry between those guys and the impact that Woody made, not only on the football field, but you guys off the field as well. I'd love to know, what exactly is your favorite memory, if you have one, of Woody?
Well, there was one of them that I remember, and this was never on TV. This was my freshman year, 1977. And we're in the locker room, and we're getting ready to go out. And I don't know if you notice now, both teams go in and out separately. Years ago, you come out together and then back in together. Well, Woody goes, when we're in the locker room, when we go down that damn tunnel, you fight them bastards, because we got 100,000 SOBs in that stadium to fight. At least we're even in the tunnel. So we had a little pushing and shoving match. Then also the Go Blue sign that they always have when Michigan, well, we ran out first. We tore the sign down. Big ruckus on the field.
So that was you guys. I didn't know that was your team that did that.
Yes.
Okay. That you were on.
It was never on TV because they cut away because of some conflict in the Middle East. So it was never captured on TV.
Interesting.
Yes. And also years before that, John Hicks years and Archie's in like the 72 through 74 in that era, they did the same thing. They tore down the banner, right?
Jeez, I can remember Bob Ufer, the old Michigan radio broadcaster, just saying they're tearing our banners down.
Oh, yeah.
He was not happy about that. I'll tell you that.
So my guess is I think Michigan probably runs out first. Then they take away the banner now. But obviously nobody goes in a tunnel together, the teams. They go in separately.
Right. Yeah, you don't. Well, they had the tunnel incident earlier this year with Michigan and Michigan State.
Right. Exactly.
Big house. And
that tunnel's not very big. It's only about maybe at most 10 feet wide.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not big. So you figure, you got 60 traveling, for Ohio State and 100 guys dressing, for Michigan. That's a pretty tight quarters.
Now about Woody too, because I've watched some other documentaries and read some books about him. Was it true that he, taught math lessons and with the military history and all that as well?
Well, he taught in training camp. There was a book called Word Power, and basically is pretty much an English book for learning words. And there's actually a kind of a neat thing where Woody's talking about apathy. You can find it on YouTube. And I'm actually a buddy of mine, Tony McGarrow. He's like in the main focus, but I'm right behind him. And so YouTube that, Woody Hayes apathy. And but basically it was called Word Power Made Easy. And that's what he would teach during training camp.
Do you remember, because I think you were on the team then for the BBC documentary that they made, the football coach about, and it was like I don't know if they followed you guys all year round or if it was just for a week or so, but that's a documentary that I've seen about that they've gotten some Woody film from.
I'm pretty sure that was in '77, and I do remember that. Okay. And I never remember Woody said, "You know what? The BBC's coming here because we're the greatest team in the country, not that damn team up north."
Of course, Woody would say that. Oh my God.
Sure.
Wow. And, because they've gotten some footage from that showing his discipline. There was that one scene in there where he's smacking that guy's butt. And he says, "You get with it." Yeah. And I don't know who that was, but that's like the poster child of Woody's discipline.
Trust me, there was some more dramatic things that aren't on film.
Oh man, just a very, very intense guy. And I actually want to ask you more about that. Like, what was it about Woody and how was his discipline? I feel like he was the most disciplined coach in the country. Well, yeah,
obviously with a military background, you can imagine what kind of a, disciplinary he was. He was a Navy guy, and obviously the assistant coaches too, kind of had the same mentality. But with Woody, he would punch you in practice and scream at you up and down, but then he'd go sit with you at the training table and say, "Hey, how's your mom and dad going? How's school going?" So once you're off the football field, football was left on the field. It was never brought to the training table or anywhere else.
Yeah, I do think that's why Woody was special as well, was because of his ability to relate to players off the field. He was this discipline on the field, but he really did care about his players, and
he did.
Yeah. And I think that's what made him special for sure. So you punted in the 1978 Gator Bowl, right? The infamous game against Clemson.
I did.
Gosh, do you remember the punch?
I actually didn't see it. Obviously there are a lot of people on the sidelines, but as soon as it happened, it went, Woody punched him. And, just unfortunate thing. We all knew what was going to happen, once he did that. But he just had so much frustration build up in him that, he just lost his mind there.
What was that transition like? Because you played 2 years for Woody, 2 years for Earl Bruce. When Woody was fired after throwing the punch against Clemson, what was that transition like from him to then Earl Bruce?
Actually, it was pretty easy. And I got to admit, most of us didn't know who Earl Bruce was. Right? Then we found out, well, he played for Woody and coached for Woody. So Earl Bruce was a mold of Woody. He really was. So his transition was really pretty easy.
And also too, I was reading in the Ohio State media guide about you. You originally wanted to be a quarterback at Ohio State, and then you.
Well, I was kind of back up, and I chose I could have gone to the MAC schools for quarterback, but I just wanted to go to Ohio State, and obviously punted, and I'm glad I took that path. For one thing, my body feels pretty good. I'm 63, so I'm in pretty good shape and not too many ailments. So in hindsight, I'm glad I kind of went that route.
And so then, of course, after you graduated from Ohio State, you were picked up by the Dolphins in that 1981 offseason. When was the moment where you realized that you could punt at the next level?
I kind of knew it my junior, senior year in college. I think my junior year, I think I was second in the nation. Didn't have as good of a year my senior year, but and then you have these little camps, and they're really not even camps. Coach would come, one scout would come look at you. You'd punt, and then he'd time you and all that stuff, and so, I was hoping, never really knew because, nothing's for sure, about 1.5% of the players make it. So obviously the chances are very small.
Now, back then, was it one of those things where you were only, being recruited to punt if you played another position? I mean, nowadays it's more specialized and all that, and you're only focusing on punting. But back then, was it they wanted guys that could do other things, or were you guys focused more?
No, back then, it started specializing. For example, before me, Tom Orosz, he was strictly a punter and kicker. Okay. We were all pretty good athletes because we all played different positions in football and actually all other sports. But in fact, John Hutchins, he was my snapper, I think junior and senior year. That's all he did. So he was maybe the first guy in college football that actually was just a true snapper. Prior to that, Doug Porter is his name. He was a guard center, and he was a snapper. But John was the one that was strictly just a long snapper. So that was I guess way ahead of the time.
I know Bill Belichick, he's talked about the history of long snappers before, and he talked about how, Zach DiAsi for the Giants was kind of like the first true snapper in the NFL.
Right.
He was like more mid 80s around that. So even before, that era, you guys were still, a couple years before. Interesting.
And by the way, now that's the best job in the NFL. Oh yeah. Because they can't hit you. Mm-hmm. In the old days when you centered, you were basically, at the mercy of who was over you. So you can hit the snapper after like maybe 2 seconds or something. But I'd say definitely that's the best job in the NFL. And you look at these guys. When was the last time you've seen a bad snap in college or the NFL? These guys are good.
Oh yeah, I mean that's their only job is to go out there and snap, and you only do it a couple times a game, really.
Right. Yeah, so between punts, and field goals, but it's definitely a lot more pressure on the place kicker at the end of the game, not the long snapper.
I want to go back to your experience with the Dolphins, and you talk about the discipline and the toughness that Woody brought to the table at Ohio State, but Shula was known for that discipline and that those hard training camps, no water on the field and all that for a while. What were those training camps like with Don Shula?
Well, I could tell you what, hot as Hades. Especially the morning practice because we were down there first part of July. And, you'd go stretch, lay in that moisture in the grass. It was hot. Then there was no breeze. And back then, of course, you couldn't do it today. Water didn't come out until you had team practice or team get together. So you probably went at least a good hour, if not an hour and a half without water. That don't happen today, But, Don had a very regimented schedule. Everything was right to the T. Nothing was actually over. If for some reason we were having a bad practice, he'd cut off practice because, he'd say, if we're practicing bad, we're not going to get better today. So his schedule was very regimented.
Did you guys ever talk about being from Fairport, being from Paynesville?
Yeah, a little bit, of course. Absolutely. Sure.
And so how about this too? You punted in the Epic and Miami game. So, the famous 41-38 loss, unfortunately, but Kellen Winslow with the towel on his head also punted in the infamous snowplow game in New England, 3-0 loss.
You did your homework.
And Super Bowl 17 against the Redskins in 1982. Yeah. So, they talk about, some of these Raiders players that were in all these infamous games. You were in some pretty infamous games just for being a punter. So just in a short stint. Yeah. What's your favorite of all those?
Well, obviously the San Diego game that we lost was devastating. That was devastating. But obviously the most, what I would say memorable in a way is the snowplow game, where the convict was on work release, had that snowplow and cleared the place off. So the New England kicker, had a solid footing to kick, because there's no way the field was literally like ice. I think the final score was 3-0, if I remember right. And it was so funny because we hardly saw him coming out because it was so snowy, and everybody's going, "What the hell is he doing? What the hell is?" And the officials did nothing about it, nothing whatsoever. So that was definitely, I would say, probably most memorable just because of the odd circumstances of it.
I think Shula wanted to do something with the league about that game. He wanted to protest the game or something like that, and Pete Rozelle, the commissioner at the time, said we can't. So,
I'm sure it was brought up, but I would, for them to like cancel a game, for whatnot because of that reason, but it was definitely highly unusual.
What exactly is punting in the Super Bowl like? I feel like it's just, not many guys get to play in that game.
Yeah.
What is it like?
Well, you know what? Obviously not just before the game, the whole week building up to it, obviously there's nerves. But once you settle in, it's I want to say it's not like any other game, but definitely before the game, with all the hype and everything, is definitely a lot more intense than any other game.
Were you ever pretty nervous during that game? Like, you don't want to shank a punt on national TV.
I think, I'm sure the first punt, I was probably just thinking, catch the damn ball and punt it. But like I said, once things kind of settle in, nerves kind of calm down, then you just concentrate on what you got to do.
Talking with Tom Orosz, former punter in the NFL and 4-year punter at Ohio State. So after Miami, for 2 years, you were with them. Then you went to the San Francisco 49ers in 1983 and 1984. And, of course, another Hall of Fame coach that you played under, Bill Walsh. I got to say, what was your first impression of that man?
Well, it was ironic because Don Shula and Bill Walsh were almost like opposites of how they coached. Bill Walsh didn't have a set regiment on meetings and practice. Sometimes you'd go in the morning, you'd have a meeting. Sometimes you'd go in and say, "Oh, we're going on in the field now." So it was definitely more non-structured than what it was in Miami.
And was he one of those like mad geniuses, like they said he was?
His genius came from Paul Brown. He worked under Paul Brown years ago, and but no, obviously, definitely a great coach. Did what actually like Paul Brown did years ago. A lot of the short passes, not just kind of just throw the ball long, but obviously, very good coach. Knew what he was doing, and also, any great coach has a system around the players and how to get the best out of them.
What's your favorite memory that you have of Shula and Walsh?
God, let me think. I think just really getting it initially, because I was a free agent to Miami, just going down to, to see, Coach Shula. But ironically, I met him before because I was national punt, pass, and kick champion when I was 10 years old in 1969. Well, I won it in the Orange Bowl. And, of course, it was a playoff game then, if I remember right. So I met Shula, way back then, many, many years ago when I was 10 years old. So it's kind of like a reuniting. So here I was, I won a national punt, pass, and kick championship in 1969 in the Orange Bowl. And before you know it, I'm playing in the Orange Bowl with the Dolphins. How ironic is that?
Wow. I didn't know you used to do those. You know who used to do those was Andy Reid, the head coach of the Chiefs.
Is that right?
He
also is Todd Blackledge. I have a banner with him on it.
From Hoover.
He was, I think he was 8. I think when I was 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Two Northeast Ohio guys, of course.
I think he's from Canton, if I remember right.
He went to Hoover, North Canton, Hoover.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
For sure. So I also want to ask you too, of all those coaches that you played for in college and the NFL, you had Woody Hayes, Earl Bruce, Don Shula, Bill Walsh. Who in your eyes was the best coach, and who in your eyes was your favorite?
You know what? It's hard to say who's the best. It's they all have they're very good points. And I think my favorite is Don Shula just because he's from the area.
Did you ever keep in touch with these guys after your playing careers?
Oh, sure. That's the reason how I met you down in Miami. So yeah, we have reunions every couple of years, 3 years and whatnot. So we get together and they're fun. They're a great time.
Yeah, I forgot too. At Ohio State, you played with Art Schleister, the quarterback.
That's correct.
The straight arrow, they called him.
We found out he wasn't.
Right. But that was just an unfortunate story to hear about. The game.
Very sad.
But what was it like playing with him? At Ohio, probably the best quarterback Ohio State had. At that time.
At the time, yeah. You know what? He was actually a loner, and we knew he was a gambler at Ohio State. He came from a horse racing background and kind of got it from there. But he just couldn't kick that habit. And obviously, he's been in and out of jail for many, many years.
So what'd you do after your punting career was over in the NFL?
I stayed in Columbus for I sold commercial real estate till I think 1993. I moved back, did a couple of different jobs for a year or two. I work for Avery Dennison now. I've got 28 and a half years.
Wow.
So that's what I've been doing for quite a while now.
And you also referee on the side too?
I'm a basketball official. Yeah. That's my winter hobby.
Is that you probably had to make some tough calls before in that? Or is it just pretty normal?
Oh no. You know what? It's not easy. It's not easy. You do what you can and go from there. I mean, obviously the most difficult is at a block or a charge. Half like the call, half don't. Right. But it's a great winter hobby. I've been doing it about 15 years now or so. In hindsight, I wish it would have started 30 years ago. But it keeps me busy in the winter and gives me something to do.
And I got to ask you something about those referees, because you hear about this not only in this area but throughout the country about referee shortages and all this, but they still seem to staff a lot of these games. How do you guys make it work even with they say referee shortages? There's
a referee shortage in every sport at every level. It's getting to the point where a lot of people are doing a lot of games. All right. We need young people to get into officiating, no matter what sport it is. But there definitely is a shortage.
Tom Orosz, former Ohio State punter and former NFL punter as well, played for four of the greatest coaches in college and professional football history. Tom, thank you so much for joining me on Open Mic Night. It was a real pleasure.
All right, Noah, thank you.
Big thank you again to Tom Orosz for coming on to the Open Mic Night podcast. Really great to hear his perspective on the Ohio State game and a lot of the stories he had with Woody and being recruited by Bo, and then also four of the greatest coaches in college and professional football history. So he's had a good career, and being able to punt in the Epic in Miami, punt in the Super Bowl against the Redskins, and punt in the infamous snowplow game. He's punted in some of the biggest games in NFL history. So, definitely a man of many stories, and really nice man as well. And happy I was able to meet him in Miami last year as well. Don't forget to check out all the other podcasts on the podcast network. The Michigan podcast with Steve Dace. That was an excellent podcast that he did earlier this week as well, talking about the Michigan game, of course, and then Fan Report with Lions and Pistons coverage. Very Pistons heavy as well. Gosh, they want Dwayne Casey out as Pistons head coach, and losing record again for the Pistons. You have the Doc and Jock podcast with Adam and John, the original, of course, and as always, the wrestling podcast as well. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. And, hopefully everybody had a great Thanksgiving again. And make sure to tune in next time, only on Open Mic Night.